Coming up on this week's show, a Mega Drive classic is getting a sequel.
A lost Atari Lynx game is being revived.
And we talk Blizzard with designer Stieg Hedlund.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our friends at Bitmap Books. Now, of course, today we're going to be talking about role-playing games. And have you seen their amazing book, The CRPG Book, a guide to computer role-playing games, the expanded edition? Now, this covers more than 450 games from 1975 up to the modern day. All the classics are in there that we know and love: Ultima, Wizardry, Fallout, Mass Effect, all brought to life with vibrant, incredible in-game images and spread over a huge 684 pages. You can check it out in the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our friends at PCBWay. Now, maybe you're working on something over the summer and you need a custom PCB making. They've got you covered. Low cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and they do services like 3D printing and injection molding. And you know about PCBWay. Massive supporters of the retro community. Have a look at their shared project section on their website to get some ideas and get an instant quote right now at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 480, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to be joining us for our little get-together before the weekend every Friday. Basically a bit of an excuse for us nerds to get together and completely geek out about our favourite subject, the wonderful world of retro gaming and technology, bringing you up to speed on what's been happening, all the big stories that have been making the headlines over the last week, and bringing you more veterans every week onto the podcast for an interview in the second half of the show. And this week, we're going deep inside the world of role-playing games.
Yes, so recently I did like a Google search on the Retro Hour podcast and had an AI overview, which is quite interesting to see what AI says about our show.
Was it complimentary?
It was complimentary, yeah. It said, we have a strong emphasis on British and Amiga-related content, which can make it seem a bit narrow, but offers appreciate that unique angle. And
can't argue with that, really.
Valuable insight. So, yeah, we know that we're Amiga kind of biased in this, but we've been trying to kind of push extra things out as well. We've been trying to explore stuff like the PC scene and the American scene as well, which is...
Well, you're a PC gamer back in the day as well, weren't you?
I had to give up my Amiga at some point and get into PC gaming. And, you know, there's such a strong history of PC gaming and a lot of developers that have kind of crossed over as well. And I think we're starting to cover that more on the podcast as well. And today, wow, we've got an absolutely amazing developer. And this is Stieg Hedlund. So Stieg worked for many companies, Koei originally, who were a Japanese developer that also had a North American branch, and living in California. It was really good that he kind of managed to get work there because they had a good history of role play games, and he was really into the role play genre. And then worked on a kind of cancelled Lord of the Rings game at EA, which is pretty interesting, and then went on to Sega STI, which, we've talked about in this podcast before, which was the Sega Technical Institute. Interesting games like Comiz Zone and one that I'm sure Joe loves, the Ooze, as well, came from there.
They were late Mega Drive games, weren't they, Comiz Zone and Ooze?
Yeah, no, very late. And there was the AM2 team as well that they were working with as well. So they're working on the new hardware and developing a Die Hard arcade as well. So these are totally like different titles to what he was originally doing. And then, he went on to a small company called Blizzard and, was a designer on Diablo and Diablo 2. So we really get into the history of Diablo and how it kind of came about. And then, of course, StarCraft, which, is feverishly followed around the world.
Yeah,
and then later, he went on to Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six as well. So, a huge range of companies that we talk about in this interview. And it's kind of fascinating to hear about like Diablo and the roots of that game and how long it kind of took in development.
Yeah, because we did touch on it, I think, about a year ago, wasn't it? We had David Brevik
Yes,
on the show.
yeah.
Obviously, worked on Diablo and Warcraft as well. So definitely a subject it's interesting to explore a bit more, I think. And like you said, quite a variety of companies and games that he's worked on there. So looking forward to this week's special guest, Stieg Hedlund. He's on the show in around half an hour from now. But you know the way the podcast works. If you're a regular listener, first half of the show is when we have a bit of a chat about the stories that have been landing on our social media timelines over the last week. So what we're starting with this week, Joe?
Got to start with Echo the Dolphin making a comeback.
Wow.
Do you guys like Echo?
You know what I did? I was on a guest on a podcast about a year ago where I went through my top 5. I think it was overrated games that I talked about. And Echo the Dolphin was on my list.
Yeah.
So I remember when it came out, the hype on Bad Influence and Games Master. And then my friend rented it. And I don't know whether it was just, when you're a kid, you don't want to read the manual and stuff. But I remember us just getting really frustrated, whether the difficulty curve was just a bit too high or we weren't really sure what we were doing. But I just remember it being like a real exercise in frustration trying to play that game. Not something I've really revisited much. I might have had a quick blast in it about 10 years ago and thought the same. But
it was during the whole kind of climate change thing, and sea creatures were huge. Free Willy had come out, and then Echo as well, and I was like, oh yeah, I was in a group called the Eco Kids at school, and we were like, yeah, we're going to save the planet. And Captain Planet was out as well.
Captain Planet.
I was going to say, did you have the little rings?
Which ring were you, Abby?
we just wrote angry letters in groups to people. But Echo was one of these games that I was like, yes, looks really cool.
I mean, it's a beautiful looking game. I'll agree with you there. I think graphically, definitely one of the highlights on the Mega Drive. But yeah, I just found the gameplay, I don't know, a bit directionless. Maybe I just didn't get it. I mean, you guys, were you fans of Echo back in the day?
I remember, so we had the first one, and I remember playing it a lot as a kid, but I don't think I could actually play it, if that makes sense. For some reason, it's always stuck with me that the password system was always just the word please, so you just plus 2 random letters. So I would just sit there, and I think please WW put you on the open level where it's just an open ocean full of great white sharks, and you just had to swim past them all. That was the only level I could do. But I would just sit there trying to play through random levels and just put passwords in and just swim around, and I used to really enjoy that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's because it was such a nice game to look at. And obviously, if you make it to the end of the game, spoilers for a 30-year-old game, you obviously get abducted by aliens and end up on the alien spacecraft.
Oh, wow. And, I don't think I've ever seen that. They
look like xenomorphs from the Alien series. And you can, fight them with your echo waves. So I just used to enjoy playing around on it. But I think whenever I'd actually sit down and try and play it, I'd get to the second or the third level and just get stuck. I think there was an octopus that I could never figure out how to get by.
That's what I remember as well, just swimming for ages and not being able to find things and no idea what to do next. I remember a lot of that.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of nostalgia for it, but like you say, whenever one of these Sega compilations come out, I play it once and I'm just like, cool, kind of thing. But it's cool to see it's getting love, and obviously Sega are kind of going down the route of Atari at the moment, trying to give people, the nostalgia, what they used to love and everything. And they've got Crazy Taxi and Streets of Rage and everything coming out again, but they have announced this week officially that we are getting Echo the Dolphin remasters of the original game and the sequel to Tides of Time, as well as a new Echo the Dolphin game, which it does say in articles that it's the third in the series, even though there was one on Dreamcast, that it also recognises that there was a third game, but I guess it means it's a sequel to the first two, so I'm hoping it's in the vein of the original Echo the Dolphin, it's going to play as a side-along kind of, what would you even call it? I was going to call it a platformer, but an adventure game, I guess.
Yeah, a swim 'em up.
Yeah, swim 'em up. I love that.
What was the Dreamcast one like? I never saw that one.
I've never played it, but it came out in 2000, and I can't remember what it's called. Defender of the Future. There we go. It's on the article here. I don't have it and I've never played it, but it was a 3D from behind game.
Yeah.
And just the odd clips I have seen of it, it looked like quite an empty game, swimming around in the ocean, but I'll have to give that one a bash. But what's interesting about this, so it was actually in January this year, Sega did trademark Echo the Dolphin and Echo again. And then on the website, there's a countdown to April 25th, 2026. So we can assume that's when these new games are going to come out. But what's interesting about it is the original creator of Echo the Dolphin. Now, I don't want to get his name wrong now. Ed Annunziata, I think how you say it. Annunziata. Did a recent interview with Xbox Wire, and he is behind the remasters and the new game. And apparently he's got the entire original team back together to make the third game.
I've been chatting with him on and off to come on this show.
Yeah, I remember you saying
4 or 5 years now.
Ravi, so. He's got something to plug now. Get back on there.
Yeah, make it happen. Yeah.
Game on.
If you're a fan of the original, I mean, I imagine that is really exciting news that the team are getting back together to make an official sequel to it. And I do think, in terms of games that I think of as being games I associate with Sega and the Mega Drive, that is definitely up there. As one of their, but even though I wasn't a fan of the game originally. I mean, I imagine because it's going to be obviously a game for new systems for current gen consoles. So I imagine, they'll have stuff like quality of life improvements and probably tutorials, and it'll maybe make a bit more sense to me. Yeah.
A little compass pointing where you should go.
Yeah, exactly. Even that would help, I think, wouldn't it? So I think, maybe there is a really good game kind of. I know it does have its fans. And I probably think that is the case, that there is a really good game kind of buried beyond all the frustration. So I'm interested to see how that'll turn out. But like you said, we've got about a year to wait, so we'll keep an eye on that story. Now, this is quite cool to see. A lost Atari Lynx fighting game has been revived 25 years after its rights were acquired. So this is a game that got abandoned back in the day by a company called Beyond Games. And then the license to it was actually picked up, and then finally something's been done with it. So the game is actually now being completed and maybe gearing up towards a release.
Have you ever owned a Lynx?
Yeah, I've got one.
I think I was at a show with you, or I was about to buy a Lynx, an original one, and you were like, have you checked the screen? And I was like, no, I actually haven't. Turned it on and checked it. I think it was the Model 1.
Yeah.
So I was close to getting one, but when I went out to America, I met a lot of Lynx fans, and I was amazed by some of the collections that they had. So it's good to see a new kind of, new old fighter lost game return. Are there any other fighting titles for the Lynx, like one-on-one fighters?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge Lynx kind of connoisseur. I do have one. Then again, the screen is really faded. So it is kind of on my to-do list at some point to get it recapped and maybe get one of the modern screens in there as well. But I do remember looking at the Lynx back in the early 90s when it was in Dixon's. I remember being blown away, because obviously I'd seen the Game Boy before that. And it always blew my mind back then. I was like, why the hell would anyone pick a Game Boy when you can get the Lynx? And it's like, full color graphics.
I remember seeing California Games on it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, California Games on the move, and considering like the graphical power of California Games, looking at this title, it's really impressive coming out for the Lynx. There's some huge sprites in there actually, and I'm looking at it on a CRT, and it's quite big at the moment, and it's hard to kind of get an impression of what it would look like on a Lynx screen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Lynx was actually made by, it was Jim Michael, wasn't it, who did the Amiga and the 3DO?
And Dave Needle as well.
Yeah, so I know they worked on it, so it's definitely got, heritage of the Amiga in there, which obviously impressed me back then. I think I know the reason now why people didn't buy it over a Game Boy. Obviously 2 reasons. Number 1, Tetris, and number 2, probably the battery only lasted about 40 minutes of it. It was quite expensive to keep that colour screen running. But yeah, so this is a game called Ultravore, which I've been reading the comments on this. Everyone's like, oh, that's an unfortunate name. And, oh, I can't believe they called it that. Am I missing something here?
No, is it like a European swear word or something? I'm not quite sure.
I've Googled it. I couldn't see anything.
Okay.
Maybe we're a bit naive. Maybe someone can tell us.
Maybe. We're missing the joke here. It does look interesting, though.
Yeah. Well, the story behind it is it was created by a company, like I said, called Beyond Games, who actually did a game on the Jaguar called Ultra Vortex, which I'm wondering if this is kind of a scaled down version of that, which I've got actually. That was a kind of a Mortal Kombat knockoff, better than Katsumi Ninja, which is the one most people think of on the Jaguar. You can tell it's a Mortal Kombat ripoff. I've listened to some of the sound from the game Ultra Vortex on the Jaguar.
That's a very Mortal Kombat.
So yeah, a lot of those very cheesy early 90s sound effects and stuff in there. But that game is pretty decent, I think, in terms of like one-on-one fighters on the Jaguar. That's definitely up there. There's only a very short preview of this at the moment. It's literally like 5 seconds, isn't it, Joe? This little teaser that we've seen.
It's 15 seconds. It's only 5 seconds of actual gameplay. But I think Ravi's hit the nail on the head. It's the sprites are huge for it. So it's interesting, to see what that'll actually look like on a proper Atari Lynx. Does look very zoomed in. So I'm hoping the quality kind of like remains, if that makes sense. But it's interesting because of, the guys who are making this Songbird Productions, they said that, they've not found it from a ROM or anything. They've actually got all the original source code and assets of the game.
So they bought it from Beyond Games 25 years ago by the looks of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And like looking at the little menu, what they've done with the teaser is, I don't know if there's any extra menus or there's like a roster in there or anything. It just seems to be like a really quick 15-second video of a fight and, no intro or anything like that. So it'll be nice to see what further stuff they have in there.
Yes, they are going to do some enhancements on it. They've put stuff like health bars in there. There's going to be variable damage depending on the moves, new graphics in there, new audio. They're looking to put in new music, new maps, new fighters in there as well. So they may be thinking of doing a crowdfunder to basically enhance this game. So it looks like it's just basically the engine of it. And
I think, how long has it been since we've covered a Lynx title?
God, I can't remember ever covering one before, yeah. It's obviously a system that is, it does have its fans. And I'm looking at it so far, it's very hard to kind of get a feel for it with such a short little teaser. It does look, some people are complaining that the frame rate looks really low, but again, you're running it on a handheld from the late 80s. So, you can't expect like 60 frames a second on that, I wouldn't imagine. But yeah, I think, like you said, guys, I think it does look a bit too zoomed in for my liking. Obviously, you're compromising with a small screen, but it will be interesting to see where they go with it. So if you want to check out the teaser trailer for that and keep an eye on the progress, they'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Now, if we're talking about cult classics, obviously going to be talking about RPGs on the interview this week. Fallout, definitely one of the favourites in that genre. The original Fallout game, Fallout 1, came out 1997. So definitely falls into the retro category. You guys fans? I know you played Fallout 4 quite a bit, didn't you, Joe?
When people mention Fallout, I'm a massive Fallout fan. Loved Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. I really liked Fallout 4. Some people weren't big fans of it, but I really enjoyed it. I've never played Fallout 1 and 2, but I've watched a lot of playthroughs, etc. of them. Just because I'm not a PC gamer. I really should, they're available on Steam, etc. And I know I'd really, really enjoy them. But I do love Fallout as a franchise. They've announced today Fallout Season 2 of the TV show is coming out in December this year, which is cool. 'Cause we've had to wait like years and years for the next season. I enjoyed Season 1. So, yeah, anything Fallout I'm happy to see, really.
Yeah, I enjoyed the originals. I played them a little bit. It was one of these PC titles that really kind of pushed the graphics back then as well. And it had like some beautiful presentation. That's kind of about my memories of it, actually. I think we should really get into it and do a whole interplay episode on Fallout.
Yeah, well, we've obviously had Rebecca Heinemann, Burger Becky, on the podcast in the early days, didn't we?
26, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it was a while ago. And I actually did see her at the that VCF East event I went to last month in New Jersey. She was there, did a talk on stage about video game music. That was really interesting. I had a bit of a chat to her afterwards. But she's actually central to this story now. This is a guy who has a YouTube channel who is the creator and designer of Fallout, Tim Kaine, who's he's got a YouTube channel that basically shares stories and looks at the game development and everything as well. And he did say on there that he thought that the source code to the first 2 Fallout games had been lost.
We interestingly had a Douglas report on the podcast as well, who did like the sound design of it and production as well, and kind of said about the source code as well being lost.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So it's obviously for such a legendary game, that is quite an omission, isn't it? If that's gone missing. But actually, in this video from Tim, he mentions that Interplay ordered it to be destroyed. So when he left the project, apparently they said that they basically ordered him to destroy everything that he had. And he did. So, he formatted the discs, got rid of all the archives, design notes, all the code for different versions, all the prototypes, all the code for everything basically went into the trash. So he didn't have anything left, and he assumed that nobody else did, which obviously is pretty gutting if you're a fan of the franchise. And I imagine for him as well, he sounds, watching the video, he does sound like a lot of regret.
Well, it kind of is. It's a practice we've heard of in many interviews that we've done, and nowadays people leave a tech company, they get marched out by security, and then their stuff's like gone straight away. Any evidence of what they worked on, because a lot of the times this property isn't part of the developers. They may have created it, but it kind of goes with the company, and it can be pretty brutal in that way. And I can imagine lots of amazing things have been lost.
And even game preservation only really feels like it's been a kind of a hot topic for companies in the last maybe decade. A lot of them didn't really care all that much back in the day. They're like just thinking of the next thing, which we've seen quite a lot. But it turns out, though, there is some hope here. Rebecca Heinemann, she basically said that she took some archives from Interplay. So she put CDs.
I think this is really, really like why Rebecca Heinemann's great, because it's the old school kind of philosophy. Like, you're told not to copy it, you're told not to do that, but she took backups of everything. She's like, she snapshotted every port that they've done, and has it on CD-ROM still, which is just fantastic, that kind of approach. Obviously, it's probably really bad, like legally and non-disclosure agreements and all of that kind of stuff. But like, we're benefiting from that kind of a firm-handed, like, I'm just going to do it vibe, which, I really appreciate. Like, we had John Gibson on the podcast as well, and they were talking about, Bandersnatch and how they were kind of hiding the code physically inside the machine, and they had to like hide on top of toilets and like try to escape the bailiffs as well. So, I love when developers kind of save things.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rebecca left Interplay in 1995, and she was working on compiling Interplay's 10-year anthology, the Classic Collection. So she basically, like you said, burnt all of the source code to all the games that they had to CDR, and she's gone through them, and they are in there, Fallout 1 and 2. She does have the source code. So that is interesting, and she's actually said there's an interview that she did with a Video Gamer website, and she said that when she gets the time, she's going to look at ways of getting Fallout 1 and 2 source code published online, which, would be interesting. I mean, Interplay's still around today, aren't they? Obviously, Rebecca Heinemann was one of the founders of the company. Obviously, she left in 1995, so I don't imagine she has anything to do with it anymore, but I imagine she probably still has some contacts there, so if anyone can do it, I think, Becky's probably the one person that could get the source code out there. And because it is so old, I mean, I can't imagine Interplay probably care all that much about 1997 source code today.
It depends if they have it may benefit them if they're going to do like a remaster or something.
Yes, I think just in terms of, obviously, the Fallout games have got a huge following, very loyal fans. I think it would be a nice fan service to put them out there. It's great news. I imagine that Tim's pretty happy about that as well, having thought that was a lost to time. That Becky's actually got a version of it. So another one to keep an eye on. Hopefully, something will be done with that. Now, here's a system that we don't cover very often. You mentioned that we don't talk about the links much Can't remember the last time we talked about the Sinclair QL.
I've never actually used a QL. My dad purchased one back in the days, and he always tells me about when he bought the QL and then was like, oh, God, it didn't have the best reputation, did it?
What did your dad buy it for then?
He was always like, I'm going to get the latest thing, new technology. And someone told him that the QL was the thing to have. So he's like, yeah. And I think he regretted it.
I was going to say, I hope he's not friends with that person anymore. I do have a QL, but it was, I'm sure a lot of our audience know, but the Sinclair QL, the Quantum Leap, was a machine released by Sinclair Research in 1984. It was basically Sir Clive's reaction to everyone playing games on the Spectrum, wasn't it? He basically said, using my computer. If you've ever watched Micro Men, he didn't want to be known as a man who gave the world Jet Set beeping Willie.
I guess it was more your kind of time period as well, because mainly my memories of it, just the advert.
Yeah, I was only 4 when it came out, so I definitely didn't have one. But it was, basically it was meant to be a business machine. Because really that's what Sir Clive wanted to do. He didn't want to make games machines. He wanted stuff, that will be used in small businesses and machines that were taken seriously. And we'd actually did a whole episode with Nigel Searle, didn't we, from Sinclair?
Yes.
Yeah. A couple of years ago. During lockdown, I think that was when we recorded that. It's probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where we kind of go into the QL story. And really it was a massive misstep. And I did a YouTube video on it probably around that time, actually, on my YouTube channel. If you want to check it out, kind of diving into the catalogue a bit. And there's not much. This machine came out at £399, which is the equivalent of around 1,620 quid in today's money.
I don't know where my dad got the money from as well.
Yeah, insane.
Like went through QR.
Yeah, dad must have been doing well. Discontinued in April of 1986. Obviously, when Amstrad took over Sinclair, that was definitely not a product that Malin Sugar wanted on the market. Only sold 150,000 units. So generally considered quite a monumental failure. And it did come bundled with some really ropey spreadsheet and database software and word processor. But the big downfall was that it had micro drives.
Oh, yes, those tiny cassettes, yeah.
Yeah, kind of cassette loops, which were notoriously flaky and definitely not reliable enough to run a business on. And it's also got that famous kind of Sinclair cost-cutting. There's not even a power switch on it. So to turn it off, you've literally got to pull the plug out the wall. So, definitely not a machine that did very well in the market, and not a machine that's got a big catalogue of games and demos. There are a handful of them out there. But the reason we're talking about the Sinclair QL today is actually there has been a port of the John Rittman classic Batman from Ocean Software, a homebrew version of it by a guy called Saberman, who's ported this to the Sinclair QL. And I don't know if you guys have ever played Batman on the Spectrum before. I'll put a link in the show notes.
The Spectrum version. I've played the Amiga one.
Yeah, I know there's Batman the movie on the Amiga, wasn't there? But the John Rittman game. I remember playing that on my Amiga, though, funnily enough. There was, do you remember a magazine called Amiga User International?
Yes, yeah.
They gave away a Spectrum emulator on their cover disc, and this game was included with it as well. Probably didn't get the clearance for it or anything, but this was actually then, really the first Spectrum game that I played, because I played it on my Amiga by emulation. So I was always quite a big fan of it. But this QL version, if you look at the specky version of the game, it's kind of not really monochrome, but it's there's not many colours in it, maybe 4 colours. I think in the Spectrum version, you've got a lot of that Spectrum colour clash. But the QL version looks really colourful, and none of that clash in there. What do you think of the look of this and the feel of it?
Yeah, I think it looks good. I can't really say much about it. I not knowing the original, I do think it looks like a pretty cool game. Yeah. I don't really know what to say about this story, Dan.
Really, the takeaway from this is, if you like that game on the Spectrum, it's a much more colourful version of it that looks a lot smoother as well. But also,
I don't know what the porting process across is like as well. And was there colour clash in the original?
Yeah, very bad. colour clashing.
Okay,
The original version of the game. There's none of that in here.
Not on this. Okay.
Yeah, which is quite nice to see. Well, I mean, it says, there's an interview with him on Indie Retro News and on this video as well. And he basically says that he's always had a bit of affection for the QL because it was a machine that didn't get a lot of love. And famously, I think, wasn't it Linus Torvalds who made Linux? He had a Sinclair QL back in the day, and the reason kind of he made Linux is because there was no software running his machine. That's kind of the story where that came from, apparently. So he basically just intended on porting a few elements of Batman to the QL as a bit of a tech demo because it was his favourite game when he was a kid.
You love your obscure machines, don't you? You know, we get talk about the Commodore Plus 4 and C64 games going onto that. It kind of seems like that.
But yeah, I think it's, just interesting to see kind of what could have been done with this machine back in the day, and that the fact that someone's ported like a very famous Spectrum game to it that looks better than the original maybe makes you think there's some untapped potential there. The big news is that recently they've just released a Sinclair QL core for the Spectrum Next. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so maybe that'll get some more interest in that platform and maybe, kickstart a bit of homebrew for the QL.
Kind of porting process is fairly easy, or people start to develop tools for it. There's a huge Spectrum library as well, so I'm sure it can benefit from it.
Yeah, so now that I've got a QL that's kind of gathering dust at the moment, so nice to have a reason to dig it out. So you want to check out that video of the gameplay of the Batman port to the Sinclair QL. I'll put that in the show notes as well, and if there's a link to a download, I'll shove that in there too. Now, just one final story before we hop into our interview this week with Stieg Hedlund, talking Blizzard, lots more as well. Patrons get a few extra stories though, so they're on the way soon as well. But I imagine Ravi is pretty excited about this one. One of your favorite characters.
What could possibly go wrong?
I don't know Bubsy, honestly. Like you guys love him. You're always on about how Bubsy 3D is the peak of 3D.
Oh, is it Joe's favourite game? Yeah, I thought it might be. Yeah, I knew one of you loved it. Yeah. I remember you saying that, Joe. As a kid, you were like, I don't want to play Tomb Raider. Put Bubsy 3D on.
I've never played Bubsy 3D, but I remember Ravi buying it and saying it's the unsung hero of early 3D games. Don't you pin Bubsy on me.
Passing the book here.
And you love Bubsy. You love Bubsy for the Jaguar. Jaguar.
It's my wife who loves Bubsy on the Jaguar. She's actually really good at it randomly. She's one of these people, she's not a big gamer, but when she sits down and gets into a game, she'll just play it until she beats a certain part of the game. And Bubsy and Fractured Furry Tails on the Atari Jaguar. When you die, you hear this a hell of a lot.
Oh, sure. Let's all torch the Bubster.
And you get a load of lives on the game as well because it's so ridiculously hard. But yeah, my missus' claim to fame is she was watching, I put James and Mike Mondays on, AVGN and Mike Matei, when they used to do those playthroughs on a Monday. And she actually got further in Bubsy than they did. So nice. For someone who's not a gamer, I think, kudos to her for that. But the reason we're talking about Bubsy is there was a rumour, actually, we were talking about a year ago, weren't we, that they were planning on bringing Bubsy back. Turns out at the moment, it doesn't look like there is any news of a new game. But if you were a fan of the, is it stretching them to call them classics? the old Bubsy games. Then there is going to be a new collection called the Perfect Collection.
Is this by Limited Run? It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So they've announced it this week. Limited Run and Atari, so that they're doing the Perfect Collection, like you say, for Switch, Steam, Xbox, PlayStation 5, etc. And pre-orders are going up for a physical release, and obviously it'll come out on digital platforms as well. It is, from what I gather, from what my own knowledge without checking, it is every Bubsy game as well as every console version of it, which, there is actually only 4 Bubsy games, but you get 8 in the collection.
Yeah, we were scratching our heads earlier, weren't we? Like, how have they figured out 8? And we're like, so you get the Mega Drive version, the Super Nintendo version, right?
Yes, yeah. So you get Bubsy and Fractured Furry Tails, which is the Atari Jaguar version. Then you get Bubsy and Claw Encounters of the Third Kind, which is the Sega Mega Drive version, the Super Nintendo version, and you also get the Super Famicom version for that, which is interesting. I don't know if that's any different. Then you get Bubsy 2, where you get the Sega Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy version. And then you get Ravi's favourite game of all time, Bubsy 3D, as well, the PlayStation 1.
You guys are the
as well.
guys that would buy a PS5 just to play PUBG.
Oh yeah, you know what? Like I'm sat here taking a mick out of Ravi, and I literally thought, yeah, I'll probably buy this.
Yeah.
And give it a bash.
It is cool that they're doing this. I mean, there's an article on Retro Dodo. They compare it similar to the Crocopedia, on the new Croc remaster. There's going to be extra stuff in here as well, not just the game. So they're going to be doing stuff like interviews and kind of some of the behind the scenes look at it as well. And also they're going to be doing remasters of them with modern enhancements to bring them kicking and screaming into this decade while still making them true to the original Bubsy formula. So that reads to me like they're going to make them a bit easier or a bit better.
Yeah, I think, if you don't understand our Bubsy humour, we've always had a laugh about it. And Lani Minella's also been on the podcast, who was the voice of Bubsy 3D, which is a proper highlight for us.
Yeah, got her to do the voice as well, didn't you, Ravi?
Yeah, amazing.
But yeah, I think, again, it's and we do take the mickey out of it, but they are games that never had the best reputation, if we're being honest. But for some reason, I think he's kind of lovable, isn't he? And I think, so why do you want it, Joe? What is motivating you to buy this?
It's just retro on a modern system. I'm always a sucker for that kind of stuff. And, I'm played Bubsy a lot because we had it for the Mega Drive as a kid, and I was terrible at it. And I think I could get to the funfair zone if I really, really tried, which I want to say is the 4th level maybe. So I'd just be interested to give it another bash. And, I like the Jaguar without actually owning a Jaguar, so it's just an obscure, weird game to be able to play, the Jaguar version as well. I have no desire to play Bubsy 3D though, unfortunately.
See, I do, just because I know it's infamously bad.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes me want to play it. I've not actually played it before, so I'm kind of curious to see kind of how bad it is. I'm hoping they don't polish that one up too much, actually. I'd rather keep it awful.
It's released as it is.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of Bubsy or just curious, there isn't a solid release date as yet, but there is a page up on Atari's website, and you can wishlist it on Steam now as well. So hopefully get a bit of Bubsy in your life this summer. So I'll put that, and of course all the rest of the stories. You don't have to Google around. I save you the job every week by putting them in the show notes on your podcast app of choice, or you can head through and click through to the links directly from my website at theretrohour.com. And a reminder, it's all they do have a Patreon for this podcast that helps us keep the lights on and bring out new episodes every single Friday. And we appreciate so much the incredible support that we get from all of our patrons. Anyone that supported this podcast, honestly, we couldn't do it without you. We give back as well, though.
Oh, yes. Well, we're doing a lot of perks at the moment. We've got the After Hours podcast, which I don't know how many episodes we're on.
47 coming up next week.
47, yeah. And a lot of them are 2 hours long as well. So that's a lot of extra content. So as soon as you sign up, you can get access to all of that. We've also got ad-free episodes. So you get some extra news. There's also a video version of the podcast, which has started to happen with interviews.
The public beta?
Yes, we're going to do the news ones as well. We've been posting a few clips of those on social media, and they've been going down really well. So if you are a patron, check out the patron feed there, and you can actually watch some of the interviews. And it does add a different aspect to the podcast as well, actually, being on video. It's quite cool. And is there any more? Of course there is. Yes, there's the patron hangouts as well.
You forget the hangout, Ravi.
Yeah, we all meet up like the Brady Bunch on a big video chat. It's really good fun. We talk about a lot of retro systems. There's a lot of knowledge shared there as well, and a lot of memories and kind of hunting down, repairs, and also a lot of kind of people suggesting things that you really want to pick up and grab. Suddenly your shopping list is huge after that. Yeah,
we love it. So if you would like to support the podcast and get access to all of that, all the details are at theretrohour.com. Now, we do have a couple of extra news stories on the way just for our patrons in a minute. We do that every week for them, so hold tight. For everyone else, just before we hop into the interview this week, let's take a second to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor, a long-running sponsor of this podcast, our wonderful friends at It's Shopify. Now, we love Shopify. Huge fans of the incredible service that they offer. And really, if you sell anything at all, online or in person, Shopify has got you covered. Particularly, they're really good if you're maybe starting something new. if you're like up and running with a new company or a new side hustle, you've obviously got massive to-do lists and tasks that you got to do every single day. And these can quickly kind of overrun your life a little bit, but obviously finding the right tool can massively help you out, simplify everything, can be a real game changer. And for millions of businesses around the world, Shopify is that tool. Now, household names use Shopify, Mattel, Gymshark, our other sponsor, Bitmap Books. We sell our books on Shopify as well, to brands that are just getting started as well. Now, the thing about Shopify is anyone can use it. They've got this incredible design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. So whatever you're selling, there's something there that you can use or just easily adapt. I mean, that is one thing that really attracted us to it, isn't it, Ravi? Just the ease of use of Shopify.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point there as well. It scales up.
Yeah.
So, Bitmap Books do huge amounts through there, and they've actually got like a trophy because they've done so well on there. And then you've got really small and little companies that are just doing little things, or individuals. And it's just fantastic because it streamlines everything. You can publish across social media and across your channels, but also you've got the world's best checkout there as well. So what you can do is you can add discount codes in, you can have all sorts of different options, bundled buying, and it's really fast to process as well. And it's got that 24-hour support.
Yeah, so if you sell anything at all in person or online, they do these little point of sale systems as well. If you do trade shows and that kind of thing, it's really your commerce expert with world-class expertise in anything from managing inventory to international shipping, processing returns, takes care of all of that for you as well. So if you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. So turn your big business idea into sales on Shopify. That's the sound you'll hear every time we make a sale. So we all need to give it a try, and you can do it actually for just £1 a month. If you head to this address, so they know that we sent you, shopify.co.uk/retro hour, all lowercase, I'll put it in the show notes, shopify.co.uk/retro hour, and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot more of this. Right, well, thank you for checking out the news this week. More for you on next Friday's podcast, of course. A little reminder as well, if you would like to help out the show, a little way you can do it is leaving us a nice review, a little 5-star review on your podcast client of choice. We did talk about that quite a bit, but it is really important because it does help us get in front of new people. So, it brings new people into the podcast all the time. That all-important podcast algorithm gets in the charts and everything. So if you can spare a moment to do that and maybe leave us a nice little review, hugely appreciated. And next, enjoy this week's guest going inside the world of Blizzard and loads of other classic companies. Way too many to mention here. But you'll hear all about it with our special guest, Stieg Hedlund. He's next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Stieg Hedlund. And Stieg worked for some absolutely amazing companies, Koei, but also EA and Sega, of course, with STI, which we're going to be talking about, Condor as well, which, got taken over by Blizzard, and then some absolutely amazing games came out, Diablo and StarCraft, and I think this is one of the interviews where there's so much to talk about that we're going to have to pick and choose some of the titles. But, it's fantastic to have you on. How are you doing?
Good. Good to be here. I actually didn't work for Condor. I talked to those guys right before I went to work for Sega. And that's actually how we knew each other and how I eventually joined them. But when I joined them, they were already Blizzard North. Okay,
so the merger had already happened. Well, we'll get into that later, because what we always start with is the first question, which was, what was your first video game experience? So, one that stood out to you, or a big memory?
One that stood out. I mean, I played Pong when it came out. My father is actually into computers. He was a programmer for IBM. And so he liked those kind of gadgets, and he got that, and I was fascinated by it, and that kind of started me off in the direction that I ended up going in, I guess.
So he was doing mainframes and stuff like that for IBM, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It was the giant air conditioned rooms full of magnetic tape,
the 360 or something like that. Yeah. So it was kind of in your environment when you were growing up programming then.
Exactly.
Well, what was your first machine at home, after the Pong machine?
Okay, yeah, just because of some of the same reasons. all the cool kids were getting Ataris and things like that. But we got the Bally arcade system because you could program on it in BASIC. So actually, I've built some things. I remember I built a racing game. It was like, it was with the perspective, going down the road and everything. It's pretty fun.
I didn't know that you could program on those and do BASIC as well. That's pretty good because then you could run it on other systems as well.
Indeed, my father knew that. I was like, I want to play games. He was like, well, let's get this one because you can program on it.
So how did you kind of then get into the industry? You worked with Koei originally, and did you also have RPG background or any kind of, Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, absolutely. I was super into that, and spent hours and hours on that kind of stuff. And actually, I worked again because I knew computers. I worked for way back in the mid 80s. They started having sort of desktop publishing companies around the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I was. And I worked for one of them. And actually, one of our clients was a guy who was running a game company in Emeryville, which is in the East Bay. And he was looking for people who were computer savvy, and actually hired a bunch of us out of one of those companies. And so I joined a company called Infinity. They made games for Macintosh and Amiga. And they made Grand Slam Tennis was their big thing, and a couple of other things. And, it was really back in those days, you sort of wore lots of hats and did lots of things. So I would, I would work on games and products that we were making, but I would also, do things like tech support. If people were calling on the phone asking how something worked, that was me also.
So then how did you get onto Koei? And, I think they were really interesting because they had a Japanese branch as well as a North American one. So how were they communicating, and how did that work?
So what happened was I was interested in getting even further into games, particularly, I had an art background, so that was kind of like one of the things that I thought I could do in games, and then I also was very interested in design. So I actually was applying to different companies. What was happening with Koei was they actually were just starting to expand into the U.S. So they had an office in Burlingame, which is also in the San Francisco Bay Area. And but what they were doing was actually hiring people in the States and then sending them to Japan to sort of learn about the games and the culture and who we'd be working with and on the Japanese side, and then bring them back to the States to work in the office there. So I actually spent a lot of time, 3.5 years, working in Japan, where I was actually sort of back and forth, but a lot of time there.
So that was like Japan in the early 90s. It must have been
it was, yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Do you have many memories of going over for the first time?
Yeah, definitely, and that definitely fit with my interest too. That was sort of where it was all happening in terms of games at that time. So it was a great place to be.
And some of the titles, it was like a mix of titles as well. There were DOS titles, but also some console ones. I was wondering what the differences were to approach your design, and kind of, did you become a lead designer on them straight away, or were you doing all sorts of different things on titles?
I eventually became a lead designer, but I'll circle back to that. I started out in art and doing design on other games. And as far as working on console games, a lot of what we did at Koei, if not everything we did, was really PC first, and then we would go to the consoles and try to simplify it in a way that still worked and made sense to the game, but was based on the PC game. So I worked on a bunch of different things, a bunch of the sort of famous Koei games, Nobunaga's Ambition, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Genghis Khan, things like that. And but what happened was we were actually developing a game that was supposed to be sort of the first game out of the U.S. For Koei, which was Liberty or Death, which was about the American Revolutionary War. And the guy who was heading up that project left and went to EA. So and they were like, well, what are we going to do now? And he was like, well, this guy knows everything I know because I've been collaborating with him pretty strongly to that point. So I took over not only the design, but really back then I did everything but the coding and the sound. So wrote the manual, did the art, did the UX, all of the design.
Was there like a specific focus on kind of getting the two markets? So I know there were some games that were ported for the NEC machines as well, but having that Japanese market and the Western market, what was the kind of thing with RPGs that appealed to both of them? How could you make it so it would appeal to both of them?
So it was mainly strategy games that they were making, it was actually kind of tricky because basically the way that the Japanese audience was moving was more and more complexity, more and more micromanagement was what their interest was in those games, where the U.S. market was like not so much. So we did some different things. There was a game called Gemfire that I was involved in that was kind of like a simpler form of strategy game, and that was really it was really thinking about the U.S. market as well as sort of teaching people how to play that kind of game so that they would potentially get more interested and try some of our other games.
Yeah, it's interesting because looking at some of the titles you've done in the future as well, they have that like cross appeal where there's lots of RTSs and strategy games and RPGs that have just gone in that like Western direction and just not hit it and been popular out in Japan. So I find that mix really interesting.
Yeah, I think the direction that Koei eventually went was one that I started pushing for early on was going to more like can we try 3D? Can we try and sort of open world, running around as the heroes of the game and fighting the battles in that kind of a point of view, rather than like this hex map strategy kind of game.
Yeah.
So that I think they really sort of had a sort of revival in the West with games like I forget what they called them, like Dynasty Warriors or something like that. I think was how they sort of rebranded Romance of the Three Kingdoms as that kind of a game.
Was Celtic Tales your first kind of lead one?
Yeah, there were a couple of games that I proposed when I got there. I kind of like absorbed what they were doing. It was like, there's some things that I think that we could do that would be, first of all, appeal to a Western audience. So I thought Celtic Tales was like a good version of that, where it was more focused on the interests of a Western audience. And then one of the other ones that I proposed was a Monkey King game, which they did after I left.
I was wondering then what that connection with EA was, because you mentioned them earlier, and then you went along there for a bit.
Yeah, I mean they were always sort of the big company in the Bay Area. So yeah, after I left Koei, I went to work there on a Lord of the Rings game, which was very, very interesting to me because it was like had that high fantasy setting, and it was a Genesis game. So that was kind of cool to be working on that. That was kind of what was new and hot at the time, and bringing some of that sort of pen and paper RPG experience into the mix as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Lord of the Rings blew up a lot later on with the films. In the 60s and stuff, it was really interesting, and kind of, I remember my dad talking about, Lord of the Rings at school and, reading about The Hobbit. But kind of back then for the Genesis, it might have seemed a bit of a kind of obscure title. Why do you think it didn't get released in the end?
Well, unfortunately, it was really almost ready. I think visually it was a really stunning game. And it was fun to play. It was an action game. There was like a side-scrolling kind of mechanic, and really what happened was that the engineer left, and so they couldn't sort of glue it all together at the end. But it was really promising. We were pretty far along, but just couldn't finish it.
So I guess then you had the kind of Genesis experience as well. You were working with Sega hardware, and I guess you had contacts there. Did that lead you on to getting involved with Sega, and how did you get into STI?
Yeah, that's sort of exactly how that worked. I knew some. There was a big. I guess Sega had kind of a big year, and they became sort of overnight the biggest console, beating out Nintendo, and they hired a whole bunch of people. And a lot of them came from EA naturally because they were really like down the street from each other. So yeah, I was part of that. I was very interested in it because I did like the console and had enjoyed working on it. But the SDI was sort of this funny little place that not everyone knew about. So I heard about it because of a contact that I had from EA. Who had gone there and suggested that I apply. So I did. That's where I ended up.
It's kind of like the experimental band of Sega for me. It's like, they're doing the kind of really high-end stylized games within Sega. How did it feel being in that like small group, and what was the talent like in STI?
Yeah, a lot of really talented people. In a pretty interesting group, and we had a lot of sort of scope where they just were like, okay, do whatever you want. And obviously at a certain point you had to make pixels move on screen and have something that they could see and say, hey, yeah, that's compelling, let's make it. But yeah, it was a pretty cool place. A lot of innovation, a lot of big talents. I mean, we hired a couple of really well-known comic book artists to work on Comiz Zone. We hired Andrew Proberg, who is our director of a lot of the Star Wars or Star Trek. Sorry, the other one. A lot of that stuff. Again, pretty well-known guy in that field who came on board there. And then, eventually did our project with the AM1 group.
Yeah. So it was Sega Technical Institute, and then there was also AM1 group, and you were kind of like working together as well on several projects. We'll go into one in a minute, but first we'll talk about Comiz Zone, because that was a really unique game and a very beautiful one as well, and came out quite late in Sega's life, in the Mega Drive's life. And do you think that kind of didn't give it the attention that it deserved? A lot of these titles would have been a lot more successful before.
Yeah, so I actually worked on both that and the other sort of one of the last games for the Mega Drive or Genesis that would come out, which was the Ooze. And they really didn't receive the attention that they should have. Both really great games, and the Ooze, we were actually trying to bundle it with the Nomad, which was the handheld version of the Genesis, but the hardware was late, so that really kind of like made it almost disappear from existence. Where if we come out with the Nomad, it would have been a different picture.
Yeah, the Nomad was like absolutely amazing, but we hardly saw it in the UK. And
yeah. I think that's true everywhere. It was so late that it was like, okay, Genesis is already gone. What do we want this Genesis handheld for?
And you put a lot of effort into that, I guess. So it must have been a bit kind of disappointing.
We did. For both of those, we really pushed the schedule and tried to get them done as quickly as we could, even though they were both pretty ambitious games.
They were both quite experimental as well. So the Comiz Zone, of course, used loads of amazing graphics tricks that just made it look beautiful, presented in a comic game. And the Ooze as well was a really interesting, like kind of bizarre title as well. Where did the ideas for the Ooze come from?
Yeah, so there was one of our engineers, a guy named Dave Sanner, came up with the algorithm for this, cellular automaton, which is what the Ooze was based on, where it could flow around objects and lose pieces and gain pieces and things like that. And then, we kind of like kept developing it. It was interesting enough that we were like, hey, let's explore it. Let's build some gameplay around it. And that became the Ooze. Actually, I was one of the main designers on that one, where I was a little bit less involved with Comiz Zone. Yeah,
I love that. It looking back on it now, it looks like a really cool kind of indie game. Like it's got that edge, the Ooze. And I don't know if it could have been released back in the prime of the Sega data. It's kind of nice that it was released at the end. Then, you had these wacky kind of experimental titles.
I was going to say, like, both of those games, I think, had like really cult status later on, like when people revisited them or played them on emulators or different things like that. So both really great games that just didn't get the attention they deserved, like I said.
Well, as you saw, like new hardware starting to come out and working with Sega AM1, what was that like? And what was the relationship like? Were you in the same building? Were you working remotely together or sharing assets?
Yeah, so they actually came over to STI in the Bay Area and worked with us there. So we just kind of hosted them for the duration of the project. So what they were doing was really trying to so AM2 was sort of their partner division that had made the Virtua Fighter games and really sort of pioneered 3D for Sega. And so these guys were like, yeah, we want to do it too. And so at STI, we had been working on Sonic Extreme, which was intended to be a 3D Sonic game. And, that eventually it sort of went into development hell. But because of that, we had really scaled up our art team in 3D. So we had a partnership with Softimage and had a bunch of those the special boxes to make 3D modeling and stuff like that in. So they needed people that had that kind of skill set. So they said, okay, well we're coming over and let's make this game.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Sonic Extreme as well, because we cover news on the podcast and we're always seeing different footage of different stages of the Sonic Extreme development. So it sounds like that was a real kind of up and down kind of title. Yeah. What was it like? And moving on to the Saturn and, seeing that arrive and then kind of started to work in more 3D.
What we did with Die Hard Arcade was actually on the Titan hardware for arcade machines, which was the same processor as was in the Saturn. So basically, we were making an arcade game, but we sort of got the Saturn game for free. So that was kind of the approach there. So we actually never made any Saturn games. We worked on them, but I guess there was like one that we sort of helped somebody else finish up or something like that. But we never actually got any Saturn games done.
It's a totally kind of different title to what you were working on before. Did you enjoy working on Die Hard Arcade then?
Yeah, no, it was great. Really, really interesting. Learning from the AM1 guys, especially the lead designer, Uchida, was great. He was the designer of Golden Axe, so I knew him by reputation, and was excited to work with him. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Were you there at the point that STI dissolved, or had you kind of left?
I left
before that,
just before it dissolved.
Okay, but could you see the writing on the cards there?
Yeah, definitely. The Saturn really, it kind of lost the console wars, and so things were pretty rough at Sega at that time. So yeah, it was definitely something that everybody could see coming, and I had an opportunity at Blizzard, so that was something that I wanted to jump into anyway. So that's what happened.
I was interested in just what you thought of the Dreamcast as well.
The
just
Dreamcast came afterwards. Because actually, I think the Dreamcast was a really, really good hardware, but I think that Sega by that point had really kind of used up a lot of their stock of good faith. But actually, I think it was better than its generation of consoles, and its games looked better for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's really underrated, the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
A good system. Absolutely. Well, like you said earlier, with Condor, it had been taken over by Blizzard by the time you got involved. What was it like returning to that kind of RPG world then? And what appealed to you when you first saw Diablo? What was the thing that really caught you?
I was always really interested in RPGs in pen and paper, and I would always play that kind of game on computers and consoles and things like that. And I never really liked it. I thought it really didn't capture what I thought was cool and fun about those kinds of games. So I really had some clear ideas about what I thought should be the direction for RPGs on PC in particular. And when I came into Blizzard and they were like, "Hey, come look at this game that we're working on," and I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is instead of having a party, which was like what all of the games were doing at the time, it was a single character. You're in the middle of the screen. You had like the sort of situational awareness where you could see around you and run around in dungeons and fight monsters, and I thought it was really kind of exactly what I was interested in. So I mean, I think I basically was like, sign me out as soon as I saw it.
So what kind of stuff were you doing there? Because like the 3D was great in there, but also like the pacing was really important with the game.
So I came in towards the end of Diablo, and yeah, it was really, my focus was just on tuning and just making sure that the experiences of the different classes were as good as they could be. And it was really about like the items and just getting them so that they felt right, and the skills and things like that. So I did like a little bit with like art and animation in that, but really, looking forward, I was like, okay, there's not going to be time for me to do both art and design. So I came in as the designer there, after doing both of them for a long time, in my early career. But, I did a bunch of early art in Diablo 2, just to like get something sort of prototyped that we could start playing and getting hands on with. But really quickly I was like, okay, I don't have time. I've got too much stuff to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because it had like such a complex history of development, like it rooted back to 1993. Was there a sense of relief when it kind of came out by the guys at the top, this project seeing the light of day?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we could see the end of the tunnel, and it was, looked really good. the engineers were working really, really hard on it because the way that we did quests and that one was really like very hard coded. So they had to like, just make all of the aspects by hand for everything. So we had this like big list of quests, and they were just like kind of whittling it down. And then, so they'd work really late at night, and then the rest of us would come in the morning and play what they had done and give them feedback on it, and just keep going.
I was wondering then how Blizzard kind of taking over, helping finance it as well, and having stuff like Battle.net involved, how that helped change the game, and do you think it would have been as successful without Blizzard on board?
Yeah, I think that as a single player game, it was pretty good. But yeah, I definitely think like Battle.net, the fact that it was free, the fact that you could jump into a game really easily, the fact that it had the chat where you could just go and just talk about whatever. Those were all like pretty cool things that people really gravitated to. And actually, like the chat in particular was one of the ways that I sort of like looked at how to work on Diablo 2, was really sort of taking the pulse of the community and understanding what they cared about and what their interest was.
Yeah, I guess you could sit there and take notes with watching people play. Yeah, were there any like features and ideas that you had that got cut? In the first one. So.
Yeah, definitely. There were some things that I saw as flaws. But I by that time I'd been working in games already for nearly 10 years. So I was really clear on like what we could do and what we couldn't do, and what was going to just delay launch still further. Like you said, it was in development for a long time. So I had the discipline to just be like, okay, we'll come back for that next time.
We'll add that to the list.
Yeah, exactly.
Save it, yeah. Did you manage to sneak any Easter eggs in there, or any kind of like little secrets or jokes? Yeah,
there were some jokes in there. Not a lot of Easter eggs, I think, in that one. I think there were a lot more in Diablo 2. Yeah,
I think I remember reading about a few, but I wonder, Blizzard, do you think they underestimated how popular it would have been as well, like initially, and then suddenly the wave of interest was huge?
I think we felt pretty strongly that we had a hit on our hands, and it's just a matter of sort of bundling it together with duct tape and baling wire and getting it out the door. I think we were all pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I think there was a shareware version in the first version as well, which must have helped spread.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we had like a little like demo version of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a real thing with PC titles as well at the time. You don't.
Yeah, I think we're basically following Doom. And that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Duke Nukem as well did that. Yeah. I was wondering then, Diablo 2, what was the kind of approach, and did you feel like the pressure was on a bit?
No, actually, weirdly, I had like I said, there were some things that I really wanted to go after in Diablo 2, and the main one was just the character classes. So the character classes in Diablo 1 all had access to the same set of weapons and the same set of skills and things like that. So I wanted to make sure that the experience of playing the different classes was really different. Where really in Diablo 1, everybody was a fighter mage, basically, right? But the mage was the best at it. So I wanted to really make sure that the classes were distinct, that there were different play styles in each of them, and then even further within that you could have different builds and really have different versions of each of those. that you could explore and make your own.
Which is kind of, great RPG games have.
Yeah.
Really good different classes, and they all stand out and unique, and they give a lot of longevity to the titles as well.
Exactly.
The trading system as well, that was a big change as well.
Yeah.
Was there any pushback to that at all? Or?
No, it was pretty important. I mean, basically what you had to do with Diablo 1 was throw everything on the ground and then grab it. And the thing is that it was, you had some people who would get really mad because they'd be like, okay, I'm going to trade you this for this. You throw all this stuff on the ground, and then they grab stuff and jump out of the game. And you'd be standing there going, oh, well, I just got screwed. So we wanted to make sure that was a better experience, and that people could trade effectively and get exactly what they were bargaining for. So that was something that we made sure was well done.
And you really ramped up the CG as well, and the kind of cutscenes in there. It must have been quite hard at the time with people all having different graphics cards and different setups that they were playing on.
Yeah, definitely. We had a whole testing lab at Blizzard HQ to sort through all of that kind of stuff. But things were starting to standardize then. I think on Diablo 1, there were a lot more problems with that kind of stuff, sound cards and all that stuff.
Yeah, it must have been a kind of nightmare to support everything as well. Did you have statistics on who was playing in which regions, and then seeing stuff like, career exploding and areas that kind of weren't usually traditionally expected for PC RPG?
Yeah, so it was actually a huge surprise about Korea, and we actually that actually came to light when we put out StarCraft, which I also worked on. So I remember that I was down at HQ, and they were like, "Hey, let's look at this video." And I was like, "All right, what are we watching?" And it was like a big tournament that they were having in Korea in StarCraft. And I was like, well, how did this happen? Because we weren't targeting that market at all. And I don't think anybody even knew there was that market. But yeah, we just blew up overnight.
Yeah, I've seen some of those kind of videos of StarCraft, like StarCraft cafes and stuff, and people are just absolutely going for it. I was wondering then, you had the different teams in Blizzard, were working on different projects. And did you guys then work closely with the Warcraft 2 guys? And
so I got involved in StarCraft because that was one of the games that they were developing at HQ. And we had this system of what we called strike teams, where when they had a playable, they would send it to us and have certain select people go and play it and get feedback. And I gave them a lot of feedback, and they liked it. So they were like, "Hey, we want you to continue and just keep working with us." So I actually had a pretty sort of weird time in the middle of the early going of Diablo 2, where I would come in the morning, I'd play their game, I'd give them feedback, and then I'd in the afternoon I'd switch to Diablo 2.
Sounds like a great day of gaming, actually. Yeah. How much were you paying attention to the rivals then? Because in RPG, you had a lot of rivals started to come up in the PC scene, and then a lot of kind of traditional ones like Ultima and. We definitely were super aware of those. I think we actually sort of lost. I think a fair amount of development time to our team playing Ultima Online, because there was a lot to explore there, a lot of interesting stuff, and I think all of us played it pretty large amount, and then also EverQuest came out also during development, and we played a ton of that as well. And I think it was
it was important to be inspired by it, but to sort of understand the differences between what we were making and what they were making and what fit into our game, and you know, what made sense in our game and what didn't.
What do you think some of the greatest like fan stuff that you've seen from Diablo, and like
From Diablo?
how the communities kind of kept it alive?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this was a while ago, but I looked, you know, many years, like 10 years, 15 years after launch, and at some guides for different builds for different characters, and you know, I was super impressed that they were just like, you know, there were like, I don't know, 50 of them, something like that. It was crazy. Which, you know, like I said, that was my goal, but it was great that people actually sort of found that depth and really explored it.
Have you ever like played some like mods or, you know, user created content and been like, that's such a good idea? You know, I'd love to implement that.
No, I actually haven't played as much of that as I probably should. There were some really cool things though. I remember when Neverwinter Nights came out, everybody was making their own worlds, right? So there were some that were like very clearly inspired by, you know, World of Warcraft or different things like that. But there was one, or not World of Warcraft, but EverQuest was what was out then, different things like that. But there was one that was like Diablo version of Neverwinter Nights. I thought that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. And so then after Blizzard, you ended up going onto Ubisoft as well.
Yeah.
And Konami, was it kind of like you were working with Konami, doing some stuff for Ubisoft, or was it two separate companies?
Yeah, two separate companies. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Konami was kind of like, it was a weird situation there where they were really sort of transitioning away from a lot of stuff, and they brought me in to work on a Contra game.
Yeah, you were doing like the arcade kind of, well, Contra and Frogger as well. That was
yeah. But they actually, so Frogger was, they were able to release, but it wasn't really a very good game. But Contra, there's actually this weird thing where Konami in Japan was actually 3 different companies. So and they had moved it from the one that we were going to license it from to a different one, and you know, made their own version of it. But yeah, they shut down that office not too long afterwards, and I think moved to, like, you know, more development in Hawaii and, you know, different places.
so that was kind of short lived.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. And then of course Ghost Recon as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was that like? Because you were moving into another then totally different environment to RTS or to you know, RPGs. You're getting into the like FPS military kind of base games.
Yeah, a very different world. You know, I'd always enjoyed like Doom and Quake and those games, Counter-Strike, Half-Life, all of those. So you know, I mean, I sort of had that experience and was interested in it, and so you know, it was fun to make those kind of games. Obviously, it's a really different take of doing a tactical one. I remember later on, I was watching a friend play one of those games, and I was like, "You can't play it like that. It's not like a normal FPS. You're gonna die." Because he was like running and gunning, and I'm like, "Yeah, that specifically is not what you're supposed to do." Yeah, so yeah, it was interesting. There's a lot of research, but you know, I mean, I think for the Koei games, they were very rooted in you know, history, and the detail and accuracy was really important. So it was really similar, but in a different vein, working on the Red Storm games and other Tom Clancy's things.
Yeah, you kind of saw like a split off in FPS where there was, you know, Serious Sam, and then you had you know, Ghost Recon, and it's kind of you're going in 2 different directions there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was wondering before we finish, because I think we've packed so much into that interview. It's an amazing range of titles you've worked on. I was just wondering what you're working on nowadays.
I'm actually advising a couple of startups and looking for something I can sink my teeth in a bit more.
Awesome. Are you still going to any Diablo things? Have you been to any like conventions or fan events?
No, I did work for King a little while back, and was able to work with the Diablo 4 team, and give them a bit of feedback about that game, and it had some hiccups, but I really enjoyed the feel of it. It really was like much more of the classic like Diablo 2 kind of feeling in that game. So I was happy to work with those guys and try to help point them in the right direction.
And I guess it was great to be back in that, RPG world.
Always fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stieg.
Thank you.